Started my first startup in '97. The world told me I was insane.
Our goal is creating future economies that are more regenerative and sustainable.
Something didn't match up. Why hasn't this become the next big thing? And that's where we invested.
The whole purpose of achieving anything in life is measurement.
Welcome everyone to the afternoon of the first day of Shadow Summit. Right, been having some great sessions and panels. So really, hopefully everyone's getting a lot of value out of it. Really excited about today this current panel. Right, so construction technology innovations. I will let everyone else introduce themselves, but primarily this panel, the goal today is to, despite being a $1 trillion industry in the U.S. alone, construction seems to lack some technological progress as other industries, right? If we take a look at the progress the auto or aviation industry have made in the past 100 years, the strides have been extraordinary. Although there have been significant advancements within the construction sector, we still see much of the same materials and building technologies at approximately the same speed, right? So why is that? So hopefully today we'll be able to have a great discussion and be able to address some of those questions. Just some general housekeeping things. For any of the attendees, right, as you have questions that pop up, please add them to the chat or to the Q&A. And as we get closer to the end of this panel discussion today, we'll leave a little bit of time at the end to address some of those questions. So with all that being said, I will hand it over to David to get us kicked off.
Thank you, sir. And I'm joined by some very great industry friends here that are going to introduce themselves here momentarily. My name is David Epps. I'm the Director of Construction Technology for Winter Construction. We're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. I spent the past probably 17 years or so working with BIM, VDC, 3D, 4D, 5D, you call it what you want, laser scannings, drones, virtual, AR, VR, XR. There's all sorts of terms and things that we do, but we're essentially a Swiss Army knife that supports pre-construction and pursuits and construction all the way through FM and turnover. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. I think, Ty, you have a very similar kind of background to I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, David. Thanks again for having me on this panel. And yeah, Dave, you explained it extremely well there. It's really the Swiss Army knife. We're supporting everything from, again, project development through the meat of construction and, even to owner turnover today. And all aspects of what we do is really enable our people. I think just, a quick update on that. But again, Ty Nguyen, I am the director for Hensel Phelps.
I'm the founder of Pathware. It's a project management software for construction real estate development. I have worked on over $80 million in construction, and through every single dollar in construction that I've worked on, it led me more and more to believe in the software that I've developed. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, good. We'll hear a little more like a short healer. Omar, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Omar Alhamuri. I am the founder of InstaCEI. So we are a location-driven documentation management platform, specifically for highway and linear construction. So like pipelines, underground utilities, and drainage projects. So really public infrastructure projects. So before founding InstaCEI, I spent about 6 years doing highway and other infrastructure project design, as well as construction supervision and management. I'm glad to join you guys.
So both Joseph and you and Omar both are shadow startups, right? You're both involved in that side.
Yes,
correct.
Sure.
Have you guys presented yet, or you still have sessions to come?
No, I have one more session to come.
Very nice.
Today at 3 p.m. Central.
So this is obviously a very broad topic of construction technology. We all kind of discussed that amongst ourselves. We could talk for hours on the benefits of this and how it affects and supports our industries. So this is going to be largely a communication of just talking. Really, we're not going to show you slides. We're going to really have a conversation about a lot of questions that have come up with us, and we're going to discuss how we respond to those. And I think we have a nice little myriad of backgrounds here. Ty and I both come from the construction field. Omar, you said you're more horizontal, but you both have. All of you guys have really, really interesting backgrounds in software and development and things. So I think we'll have some really good perspectives and different ways to answer a lot of these questions. And And as was mentioned before, if you guys in the panels have things you want to talk about, go off the path, feel free to do that. If those of you in the audience have questions, feel free to put those in the chat box and we'll address those at the end and make sure that we can get all those questions answered for you. So just to jump right into it, really high level question. What is the biggest impact of construction technology on our industry? Any of you guys can jump in on that one first, or I can take it. What do you feel?
I'll make a run. David, I can make a run at it real quick.
Dive in.
Yeah, I think just for being with Hensel Phelps now for going on 15 years and just what I've experienced in the last decade, it's just a lot better tools for communicating, right? Whether it's, the mobility aspect of what technology has brought us, allowing us to spend more time in the field, and then really accessing that same, those databases, allowing our people to make, some really important decisions with real-time information and what's driving the field on a day-to-day. It's one of those things that I feel that's been very impactful.
I can jump into that because I have the same kind of background here. I think communication, you hit on the head there, Ty, is the biggest thing for us as well. I think of BIM and VDC as a lot of a practice run in a way. It allows us to kind of simulate the entire construction workflow and process, on a computer in an iterative, digital world where our bad choices have a much less impact financially on ourselves and the client. It allows us to kind of create problems and figure out clashes and resolve issues ahead of time and run through different iterations and simulations to really help communicate things. A lot of what we do isn't really solve problems per se, but it helps find them earlier so that we can figure out those solutions a lot earlier in the project versus when you're standing out in the field and realizing, oh, that's not going to fit because nobody communicated. We realize it months ahead of time so we can avoid those problems. That's kind of our perspective.
Yeah, I think also, one thing is improving safety too. I think, especially on highway construction jobs, like we've seen a lot of, accidents and fatalities. I think I've seen, new technologies that improve safety, that allow people, especially the field staff also not to be, around moving traffic or something like that to find any piece of information. So basically, improving safety is a huge factor too, I think.
I think actually a big impact on.
And again, just cost and schedule, right? I think that's, just deliver a project faster. I think I was reading something on McKinsey reports. GCs leave about $265 billion, I guess, on the table every year, and that's the reason. The reason is because they just do a lot of reworks. They're not really delivering projects, I guess, on time at schedule. So yeah, that's another factor, I guess.
Very, very, very true. We do leave a lot of money on the table.
Yeah,
I've heard various numbers, but I've heard up to 30% of money is wasted in construction, and we've just come used to it, and we accept it as an industry, which is terrible when you really think about it compared to every other industry. But we just come accustomed to this fact of we're going to lose a lot of money on every job, and everybody's just kind of okay with it. And I think that a lot of this construction technology can help chip away at that and help us, be more profitable for ourselves and our clients.
Yep.
Something to say as well?
Yeah, I was going to say that.
I think he's still having bad connection.
Me? Can you guys not hear me well?
I can hear you. Okay.
Ty, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. Keep going.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so I was going to, one of the greatest impacts, in my opinion, that construction technology had on the industry is actually gives the ability for developers and contractors to take on more projects where and actually expand in geolocation. So construction was, years ago, right? It was very localized GCs, very localized developers. And I think technology gives developers and contractors the ability to expand the businesses in a healthy manner and take less risk expanding. So I think it's one of the greatest impacts, in my opinion, on the industry.
So in a similar vein, so what if we just took it all away today? What if it all went away? What if we just removed everything that we've become used to? We incrementally add these tools to our tool belt each year, and we just don't really realize how much of an impact they actually have until you try and take them away. What if we got rid of iPads and drones and laser scanners and 3D modeling and just said, you know what, you're going back to pencil and paper? I'm sure we could figure it out, but what do you guys think would be the biggest impact? What would we lose?
A lot of what you conveyed there, David, was we would lose a lot of efficiencies that we've gained, I think, in the last handful of years, right? So, for instance, I think if you're doing a high rise in the past, prior to having an iPad or just having an application that we can drive into our database with. Literally, if that site is, a block away from your trailers, I mean, literally thinking of going back and forth every day to access information you need really in those miles, right? Or you're sometimes blocked with our people, and then exponentially. And then within that, even the simple process of updating the drawing sets, right, on a regular basis. I mean, imagine the pain back then that you had to make and ensure that every drawing set was updated on every level, right? And then every crook and cranny. Today, we make that update once, and then it's proliferated across the job site, ensuring that everyone's building off the latest set of documents. So a simple example like that is something we've taken for granted. But man, imagine if we peel back what you said there, like absolute chaos, I would think, on our job site.
And it's not even perfect today. Like you said, that one simple issue, just making sure everybody's using the same data, is a challenge now. I can't imagine going back 10 years, 15 years and seeing how they did it back then.
And also, you don't have any backups, I guess. If you lose the documents, there's no backup.
Right.
Funny story, one of the people who used to work for my company, previous employer, he got mad and quit, and he just took the whole construction document with him, the whole box, I guess, and he quit, and we lost all the paper trails, I guess, we had on that job. Obviously we were doing everything paper based. So yeah. By the way, people still do it. So I wouldn't say all the companies and construction teams use iPads. A lot of people still do a lot of their processes on paper. So yeah.
Joseph, did you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, to Ty's point, I think organization is a big thing with Luis. I think we're very dependent on keeping a lot of our RFIs, our change orders, schedules, everything on all these systems and platforms. And you take that away, I think everyone's going to get lost in all this crazy mess. And of course, coordination, which is also to Ty's point.
Coordination is the easy one, man. We started doing that, 15, 20 years ago? Trying to replace the old light table concept of just laying drawings on top of each other on a light table. And we converted to 3D coordination and BIM and all these things. And it was all brand new at the time. And it really fundamentally hasn't changed that much in the past 15 years because, you look at Navisworks, that hasn't changed in like 10. But the workflow is generally the same kind of clunky process, but we figured out how to make it work, right? We figured out how to make it, part of our process. But we think about that now. Think about if we didn't do clash detection, as basic as that is as part of our daily jobs. I think a lot of folks take for granted about how much effort goes into those coordination processes and how much we avoid issues in the field. We'll find thousands of actual issues, not just the millions of clashes that you see.
Right.
All that, so many things ahead of time that nobody ever sees, and they just don't realize that those things could have been an issue. So you take that away from people, and it's like, well, we actually would have had a lot more problems in this project than we realized. So I think that we do take a lot of these construction tools for granted now, and I think that it's become just embedded in our processes. So I think we would lose a lot more than we really think if we had all these things taken away.
I agree with you.
Thinking about investing, why is as a large scale GC, why is an investor, a developer, an owner, why should they care? And we talk about I mentioned clash detection just now. Most owners don't really care about clash detection. They don't want to know about the things that go behind the scenes. They want the product at the end of the day, right? They don't want to know how you got there, how much you avoided to get there. But why should they care? What should they care about as far as the tools that we're using? Why should it matter to them?
I think accountability is very important, and it's overlooked a lot of times, especially with these tools. And this is what they help bring, accountability. And for a developer, it's something you're always looking for. You get hit with the change, you always want to know why, who, what, where, when. So I think accountability is something big that it brings to developers.
Agreed. Ty, what do you think? Why should you Hensel Phelps is a fairly large GC. Why? I'm sure you had the same challenges that I've had of my career, just trying to figure out how to justify a lot of these things that we're doing. Why? Yeah. What would you tell us another large scale GC now? Why should they invest in the tools that you use?
No, that's a great question, David. And it's complex, right? I think for years, you and I lived through it where, we didn't have a lot of choices, I think, with a lot of what we did. Today, I think, if anything, complexity is tenfold, and we have overlapping choices and technologies and things to pick from. So that in itself has caused some, I think some some focus where, I think as Hensel Phelps, we're trying to be more strategic on it. I think beyond just kind of sourcing that shiny object and picking, the best in class. Sometimes we're having to understand within that environment how it fits within our own ecosystem. Is it sustainable? Is it going to be cost effective? Is it going to scale the way it needs to? And really everything that we're doing there with capturing and managing it, I think where the owners, really are starting to get more progressive and caring is really how can they leverage on that same data set that we're capturing and managing and use it to maintain their facilities, right? To kind of continue that whole process from not only what we do, but really to the life expectancy of their facilities and their buildings and their projects. So, that's really my experience in the last handful of years is, working with those owners that are getting more progressive and are caring more in terms of how we're doing that during construction. But again, from the Hensel Phelps perspective, it's really trying to be more strategic, really about how all the pieces fit, right? It's almost like connecting the dots, right? From everything we do with, like David, like you, with, when we go chase work, right? What does that look like? And how we're using data there to how it like transitions into, we get awarded into pre-con, right? And then from there, it's just like that workflow and trying to avoid really the silo approach of how we're setting up our work. So
I think you hit it really early on. You said, don't just go and buy a bunch of the new toys. And we go to these conferences and we see new things pop up in our emails every single day. And it's hard to kind of filter through all that noise and figure out what's an actual tool that's going to support us. And I found that if you don't just try and find every new cool toy and try it out, figure out what your actual pain points are first, figure out what your challenges are, and then go and try and find a tool to solve that issue. Not just, hey, here's a new drone, here's a new scanner, here's some new goggles you can use. Figure out what's actually challenging your job sites. Not just you in the office, but your superintendents, your project managers, the guys in the field, boots on the ground. Talk to them, figure out what their pain points are, and then go and try and find a solution, whether it's hardware, software, what have you. But starting there first makes a lot more sense than just trying to figure out, hey, can I use this new tool and try and force feed it into my workflow?
Absolutely, because it just, there's no sustainability in that, right? To what David touches on.
You'll spend a lot of money spinning your wheels, and you'll have a lot of folks mad at you for wasting time and money. And you have to really figure out and vet each one of these things before you try and put it in front of your superintendents and your guys and out in the project sites. Yeah,
and to what David touched on, we see so many great solutions today, and obviously Joseph and Omar, you bring some yourselves, right? For us, it's really not even, before let's just use that best in class solution, but today it's really, oh my God, yes, but it's really square, and everything I've got right now is round. How do I make it fit into what we do? And we're tied to legacy systems as well. The agility that we had a decade ago is no longer there. I mean, we've got systems today that are set up that are really ingrained into what we do on a day-to-day, and to have these ancillary pieces come in, it's really trying to figure out how to make it all work together and scalable and sustainable. So.
Omar, Joseph, what do you think? You guys are both developers. Why should a GC or an owner, or why should one of us invest in the tools that you guys have been creating?
No, I mean, I agree with you on, fixing those pain points that you have. I think what I have seen a lot is people just want to deploy IT solutions, just to stay up to date, I guess, with latest and greatest technologies, without really, understanding the value of the technology they're going to deploy. I think obviously why invest? It's, a no-brainer, right? You look at the data in the industry, it's the least digitized, increase in productivity and, just, capturing issues before they happen. I think, over and over again, right now, I guess also after COVID, a lot of PMs, they manage different construction teams in different regions. I mean, without technology, you can't do that. You can't do remote inspections, like thousands of miles, I guess, sometimes from the job site. So being able to manage more teams and maybe in different regions and different projects, I guess, in different regions, while making the client happy, I think that's a win-win for all of them, the client and also the GC.
So teams are getting leaner, right? You got less people doing more work.
Sometimes, yes, yeah.
a lot of times, that's how these technologies are going to help shore up those less people that you have on your teams. You got one guy managing multiple projects versus managing one, right?
For sure,
I help support that.
Yeah, and again, going back to fixing pain points, I think that's the primary goal, I guess.
Sure.
Figure out what kind of pain points you have, fix them, and see the right fit for the technology.
Right. Joseph, thoughts?
Yeah. Well, aside from the accountability, which, like I said, I think adds a ton. Simply put, I think winning more projects. I think having these technologies puts you ahead of other contractors that maybe do not utilize these technologies, and will put you ahead in bids. I think ultimately implementing newer technologies is more attractive, especially in municipal projects and larger scale projects, and definitely help you win more projects.
You bring up a great point there, Joseph, because these tools will help us communicate our plan, like from our, as a GC standpoint, it helps us communicate how we're going to build it, our logistics, what our phasing is going to look like, show that we really have the tools to understand and communicate the way that we're going to coordinate this building and how we're going to build it, and how we're going to validate what's installed via drones or scanning or what have you. Yes. The flip side of that coin, I've seen this a lot in the past few years, is you see a lot of owners come back and say, well, you got a lot of nice shiny toys. What's that going to cost me on the back end? You guys look like you're more expensive now. And I've seen that push back quite a bit. So I'm trying to help temper that and push the gas where I need to and push the brakes in other ways, because a lot of owners just look at that as, well, that's just going to be an expensive tool that you guys are going to use. I don't know if I see the value in it yet. You guys have any thoughts on that?
Pilot, try it.
I wish it was that easy sometimes.
Well, I actually think about it a lot, and it's what led me to kind of develop what I've developed. And it's I think one of the problems with the technology is A, that they are too expensive, and B, that they don't really add much value to the end product. Meaning, if you, David, you're a developer on the GC, I'm using this, and these types of files, this type of technology, BIM, and all these things, and you tell me great, but my tenant at the end of the day is not asking me what piles are in the ground, what type of superstructure did you build, did you use BIM on the project? He doesn't care. He's paying the same rent either if you use BIM or you didn't use BIM.
Right.
The end product is the end product, and I think that's one of the problems with construction and the expense of the technology. So you bring up a good point. The end product doesn't really.
It's getting better. You see the cost of things coming down as more competitors come into the market. You see laser scanning tools coming down. You see drone tools coming down. So it's becoming more ubiquitous and accessible to a lot of different folks, especially with like I said, a lot of competitors coming out and kind of driving that cost down. Things are getting more and more efficient. So that's helpful. But it still is, it still is a cost. It still is an overhead cost. It's going to hit everything.
Yeah, that's a great topic. I think we can spend days on this. I think with a lot of it, guys, it's become standard of care to everything you've talked to, right? It's just an expectation. Like as an owner, you're going through that coordination process. But a lot of times don't care about the tool that you're using. To David's point, right? They want the end result. Joseph, to what you're alluding to, a lot of it is really trying to be creative on the backside. So beyond, I think, justifying that cost of that new technology, it's really a bartering system where maybe we can reduce 2 people on that job because we brought in this new technology that causes all these inefficiencies, right? So it's a balance between bringing in new technologies, but then it's also, are we creating efficiencies in everything that we do? Because a lot of times, I think in my world and in David's, that's really the selling point is, yes, we can create these efficiencies and actually save in the long term. You may have these upfront costs, similar with the whole concept of BIM, right? Doing things early on, but then the backside is truly where the value is gained. So.
And also, I think one point is I think you need some kind of like a data-driven technologies, because you can't improve what you can't measure, right? So you want it to have like some kind of technology that allows you to not only look at the performance of the project, but also have like a lessons learned data that you could actually improve on going into the new projects or future projects. So data, like a data-driven platform is also have a huge benefit, I guess, too.
Yeah, quantifying it's really what everybody wants is that bottom line, right? And Ty, I'm sure you've dealt with this. It's just as long as I have. Like, how do you justify the cost of BIM coordination? And I'm sure you've done the same numbers I have, trying to put quantification, put dollar values to every single one of those clashes, and trying to combine them all together and boil it up to some number that makes sense and you can justify. We've been doing it for years. We're generally past the point of actually really having to justify it because people kind of get it now.
Yeah.
Early on, I spent 12 years at Holder, and early on during coordination, we didn't really understand how to sell that really well. We made the mistake of quantifying all that and then telling the owner we saved them $750,000. And so they said, okay, well, where's my where's my $750,000?
Yes.
First thing you saw was, okay, you saved me all this money. I was like, really? We should have worded that differently. Really, we avoided you spending an additional $750,000 of your contingency money. And so we learned really early on that you have to kind of word that the right way, because it's really avoidance of cost versus savings, right?
That's right. And that's hard to
like
quantify.
buying insurance. Do you really need it? You don't, unless you need it, you don't actually know how much you've saved. And so, like you said, Todd, the owner doesn't care how much we coordinated. They just know that the end result looks good. You may have done that fine without using BIM at all, and it's really hard to justify that because every single product we do is kind of a one-off, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of another question I want to talk about is why is it we're lagging behind these other industries like aviation, like the auto industry, like iPhone production? Like why is it we're so far behind? And I think my interpretation is what I just said. We're building a one-off tool or one-off building every single time in a different environment, different atmosphere, different ground, different location every single time. So you don't get a chance to rebuild the exact same thing 100 times, a million times, and really find those efficiencies. That's kind of where I was talking earlier about BIM being a kind of a practice run. It allows you to kind of run through the whole process at least one time and figure out where a lot of those problems are going to be, so that ideally you don't run into those issues ahead of time, right? We run through coordination and figure out all those oops scenarios where things might hit. And ideally you have this perfect model. Never really happens that way, but you have this perfect model that you can then go and build. At least you have one practice run. These other industries, they have the benefit of being able to build thousands or millions of these things, and they get to really refine these things down. So 30% waste for an iPhone would never pass. You know, they get down to fractions of a dollar of savings each time, whereas we're looking at, like you said, billions of dollars in avoidance.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I think as we transition, it's I think one of our struggles has also been, like, for instance, example would be, David, you probably experimented as well with robotics on site, right? I think in our environment, to your point, it's so dynamic, and for me to bring a robotic on site, it shuts down the job site, because really becomes a rock star, meaning that I've got groups of people stopping and staring, and so the environment just doesn't, like in the automotive industry, it's a repetitive task. They're on this line, you've got this robotic arm that's doing whatever task. We're in construction, because of the dynamic environment, you bring a robotics on site, and it's going to go through this growing pain where literally people are just staring at it. You're actually losing production because of that robotic being on site.
Right.
And with even AR, VR, I mean, really what we found, and you probably found similar, is just as we introduce technologies like that into construction, because of safety and because of the dynamic environment, you got to have a spotter for that individual wearing that AR headset on site, right? So again, it's not only one resource now, you got two, even on drones, sometimes you got to have multiple spotters on site. So now you maybe have, instead of that one individual flying that flight, yes, they are, but then you may have to have 4 or 5 different spotters around the site because of the safety constraints, right? So again, that's one of the reasons why I think we're struggling as construction, is because of that exact environment that you're touching on, David. And we got to do better to kind of figure out how to improve it and how to integrate it.
You mentioned the robotics. I mean, we've seen all sorts of innovations the past 5, 10, 15 years. You got automatic bricklayers, and you have little robot dogs walking around with scanners on them, and you have drones that are trying to fly. They're autonomous to a point, right?
Right.
They can do certain things in very specific atmospheres where the layout machines that you see. They're really great if it's a completely flat slab and there's nothing on the ground. There's no broom sitting over here. There's no trash over there, which you and I both know, Todd. That's a job site. Job sites have stuff all over the place. There's no perfect scenario that really exists. And a lot of these autonomous tools work really well in perfect environments. And these exact environments they were designed to be built in. But they don't work on most construction sites because, like you said, it's dynamic, it's changing. There's a guy that's going to drop a broom right in front of it, and that just completely changes everything that it can do. So until we can figure out how to, I don't know if it's make them more autonomous or make them smarter. You got Roombas that can fly around the room and like move around and adjust to things and sort of kind of learn as they go. I always use the Prometheus example where the thing just sits there and flies around the cave, right, and scans. Right. That's my fantasy world, is figuring out a tool that can do it. I've seen things get closer and closer, but something that's autonomously can fly around a job site and laser scan for me would be fantastic, because it would remove a lot of things. But you have to kind of try and figure out how to do that with a drone and make sure it doesn't hit things and make sure it meets FAA requirements. And there's all these regulations you have to think about. But that's kind of where I get excited, is when you start to see all these different technologies kind of melding together and hopefully like removing some of the tasks, like having, a college educated person stand behind a laser scanner and pushing a button all day long. And that's the kind of thing that I'm starting to slowly see. I don't think it's there yet. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot of that autonomy get a lot better.
Yeah.
As a lot of this LiDAR sensing gets integrated with drones, gets integrated with layout machines, gets bricklayers, and all of it starts to kind of meld together into some tools that are going to be really, really interesting to see.
Absolutely.
Omar, Joseph, what are your thoughts? Why are we so far behind these other industries?
So I think comparing it to other industries is a little unfair. I think by the amount of users, you brought up iPhones, the amount of users an iPhone has and the amount of, end use, everyone, it really is in construction, but to actually be like the end user, the one that purchases the product, it's not as common. Also, I think, the more you take off, for example, you said vehicles or aviation, forget, you put in a better engine, they're going to pay a lot more money, which is you put in leather seat, things that even the user doesn't even see, just like throughout the construction project where the tenant doesn't see what you did to build a building, but what piles or what superstructure is actually behind the building, they're not going to pay more. They're not going to pay more. In the vehicle, they're going to pay more. It's a better engine. You got to be V8. You got to be V6. It's different. I think also you have the other, another factor that comes to play here is you have a developer, you have a GC, and a lot of times there's friction. The developer is always, that's means and methods. I don't care what you do, that's means and methods. And then you have a GC who is trying to maximize, of course, try and make as much profit on the project as they can. So, when you get a person tells them means and methods, I don't really care what you do, means and methods, and then another person trying to make as much money off the project, and they're gonna put aside all the technologies that they could do without, and they've been doing without for years.
Unless it's a tool that can help them be efficient, which is kind of where I think Ty and I try to go with it. Can a laser scanner help us validate our construction better than a guy with a tape measure? Maybe, maybe not. And it really depends on the job, I think. But yeah, that's kind of where our challenge is trying to find those tools that actually are efficient and aren't just cool to look at, right? Flying around a drone's great, but what does it really do for me? I can take pictures from different vantage points. I can do some thermal scans. I can do general photogrammetry. Does that add value to my job, or is it just cool looking? And so that's kind of what Ty and I have been working with for years and trying to sift through is what's the difference? What adds value versus what's a distraction, and what's just going to cost me more money and time at the end of the day?
Yeah, 100%.
I think, I could speak for government jobs, government construction. What I noticed that is, you have a lot of different entities like cities, counties, and DOTs, and each entity, they all have their own processes and policies and the way they need to do construction and documentation and management. And those processes, they never change. I mean, you have great technologies, but a lot of times, you still have to follow those, processes, I guess, that you have within the government agencies. So, you have PMs, stuck, I want to use technology, but the client is really, they don't want me to innovate because I have to follow their process from, 50 years ago. I think that's something that I have noticed, especially on the construction side in the government jobs. Maybe on the commercial side, it's kind of different. But, policies change, there's no politics, something like that. But on government jobs, I think, just changing policy and having those, politicians to, stay up to date, I guess, with technologies. And, changing the culture, I guess, I think, just before you deploy IT solutions, change cultures, train people, show them the value. And, again, going back to fixing pain points.
So similar question to the last one. The last one was, why are we lagging behind other industries? Just looking introspectively to our just construction, why is it that we're building with the same stuff? We're building with brick and mortar. We're pouring concrete in the ground. We have all these tools. Why is it we're not doing it faster? Ultimately, we are building in the same kind of time. I think that we are building more complex buildings. Sure, I think we have a lot more stress and pressure on us to build them faster. But really, what is it what's stopping us? What's stopping us from doing these things so much faster? What are you guys' thoughts? It's a very general question.
It goes back to culture and training. I worked on big design build projects and small projects. I haven't seen managers and executives spend a lot of time doing training especially for using technology. I mean, they only do it once, and then at the beginning of using the technology, the implementation meetings or kickoff meetings, but then they never spend any time, just developing and training, I guess, the end user. And a lot of times, they get, you have people, I guess, in the industry, they're not tech savvy. They get frustrated, complex tools, and, you have to use 20 different integrations, and, you have to go there just to find one piece of information. I think it's just training the end user. Managers have to spend more time, I guess, and money, on a recurrent basis, like
Sure.
once every quarter or something like that.
Most companies end up having like 1 or 2 or 5 specialists, right, to do all the technology stuff versus trying to train the entire company in doing it. Because ultimately, these guys don't want to spend every day doing technology when it's a lot easier. They can call up the guy who runs the model, or the guy who runs the drone, or the guy who runs the scanner, and they can do it 10 times as fast. And they end up using that as a crutch almost. So why would I want to do that when I got somebody who's going to do it a lot faster when I can do my day job? And so we kind of fall into this cycle of just allowing somebody else to get really, really good at it, where the rest of the company just kind of allows them to do all the work for them. But there's something to be said for that also, because having a specialist, they can do it that much faster. Does it make more sense to do it that way? And I think every company is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of external factors come to play here as well. I think today, as opposed to many years ago, we have a lot more, Department of Environment and many other departments, safety concerns, things, a lot more eyes on a specific project, a lot more inspections we need to go through. Not necessarily bad things, good things. I mean, job sites are much safer than they were 50, 100 years ago. And I think having all these eyes on one project, definitely has an impact on the speed at which, or kind of restricts the speed at which a project can go. I mean, I think today we have the ability to go, put up 50 stories and leave. But I think there's a lot of, again, external factors that kind of slow it down, make sure everything's right and safe. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and Omar, I think I agree with you. With a cultural shift, right, and I think in mindsets. I think, hey, David, you brought up a good point earlier in the conversation today where you said that, clash detection, right? We went from the light table, we introduced technology with BIM and VDC, and, we're getting better, but, 10 to 15 years later, why are we still doing clash detection? Today, in my opinion, almost it's a reactionary method, right? We got to get earlier in the process within design where, with technologies today, we should be able to leverage it in a way that, it defines criteria. You pick a point A, a point B, that process pipe's got a certain flex, a certain bend. It can only bend this way. It's sloped. That should be more built up front to have better designs rather than getting to the coordination phase where we're just running clash to see what hits what and then having someone move, right? I think, that could be much improved.
Well, that's essentially that. It just comes down to us all building in silos, designing in silos, working in silos, and just kind of throwing our data over the fence to everybody else and saying, "You guys figure it out, right?" That's just what we become accustomed to.
Yeah.
Whether I'm the plumber, or the electrical guy, or the mechanical guy, or the structural guy, we're just kind of building in our own way, just ignoring what everybody else is designing, and then throwing it to whoever, the architect, the design team, the contractor, and saying, "You guys figure it out."
Yeah. Run clash. Here's our design.
Run clashes. Figure out where we messed up, and then tell us where to move things. You're right. If this could be a much more integrated process, if we all got on board earlier and just talked and designed in, not in a vacuum, but together, and figured out where to do things right the first time. But we've just gotten so used to doing it this way, and we've duct taped it together to make it sort of work.
That's right.
It's not perfect by any means, but it sort of works.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think we've gotten those success stories, I think, between all of us out here where we've seen those success stories. But I think part of the constraint is that the consistency. We're not doing it on every job, right? It's a mixed bag. It's cafeteria style. And I think the commitment to really standardize and to make it really, effective on every job isn't there yet, or not where it should be. So again, cultural mind shift, right? Be more proactive, and then again, I think with that consistency, I think needs to be absolutely improved on.
Agreed. We've got a few minutes left before we do some Q&A. I want to switch gears to you. Got the developers on the group was here and talk a little bit about why you did what you did. What made you decide to create the tools and the softwares that you did? What gaps did you see? Why did it make more sense to go and create your own thing versus going picking an Autodesk or what have you, to try and figure out how to solve the solution? What were your pain points? Either one of you can go first, but I'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
Okay, so I was working on about $45 million in construction, managing $45 million in construction, emails, Excel, typical stuff. And we got this project that actually brought us to the $45 million in construction and said, okay, we got to bring on some Procore, something to manage this. This is crazy to continue doing emails and Excel. We had many calls, demos with the Procore team. They came in with an annual contract and an extraordinary amount of money, their cost. And the managers of the company looked at me, told me, here's Excel, here's emails, continue doing what you're doing. And at that point, I realized there's a problem in the industry a little bit where things are too expensive. And if companies that like I was working for, not that they can't afford it, but don't want to spend the money on it, then there's many other companies like that. So I saw that as an opportunity to kind of go out there and develop something that shouldn't be that expensive, to be quite honest with you. So that's where it started.
Develop something essentially that's similar to Procore, right? As far as fundamentally the way it operates, what it manages.
Correct. Payment applications, RFIs, submittals, schedules, daily reports. Pretty much, Ty's actually seen it a little bit, and yeah, I went along the lines of what Procore was offering. So I'm trying to make it more accessible. That was the goal.
I don't think you're the only one either. I think a lot of folks are running into the same scenario where they just don't have the funds to commit to something that's already baked like that. And they either develop something on their own or have somebody that's intelligent like you to do it on, create their own in-house tool. The only issue with that is then you're fundamentally you're married to that, so you got to keep doing your own updates. So it's good and bad. You're kind of creating, you're turning your teams into almost beta teams, and they don't really realize it. They don't understand why the buttons don't work sometimes, but you get to fundamentally grow a tool that works specifically for your environment, your organization. So that's correct. I've seen it go both ways. Sometimes it's nice to go pick it off the shelf and hope that it works, and sometimes it's nice to kind of create your own tool that's perfectly for what you need. But
I agree.
So it's great to hear that's working.
Yeah, so for InstaCI, I guess, when I was spending a lot of time on highway construction jobs, 5+ miles of highway construction, I realized, I wasn't able to locate myself, when I was looking at the blueprint, I wasn't able to find the right information in the right place. And then when I looked at what kind of software there is out there, I noticed that everything is built to kind of fit, the vertical construction. And horizontal construction is kind of different when it comes to the means and method and finding the information. So we built like what we call Google Maps for construction. You could just have whatever linear assets, RFIs, submittals, all of those, I guess, on a Google Map platform. Obviously, doing monthly estimates and quantities, things like that. So I used to spray paint stations in the field. I don't know if you know what I mean by station, but it's those marks that you see if you drive through a highway construction job every 100 feet. So I used to spray paint those when I was doing internship, and I got tired of it. I said, there's got to be a better way to do it. So I built, the mobile application, and then I just expanded the tech. And, we're kind of making it specifically to infrastructure projects.
Do you think the tools you've created can be transitioned to vertical?
I think it could, but I think, vertical is busy with a lot of software. Horizontal has been lagging, I guess, the technology. I think, and that's why we wanted to start.
Gotcha. Ty, what's your experience? Did you go the Procore route? Did you go your own baked in-house tools? What have you seen? I've done personally both.
Yeah, I wish I would have met Joseph maybe a decade ago. But no, we've exhausted every path forward. David, I think we did as a company a pretty thorough analysis in the last year, right? Just selecting, that right tool, and obviously cost plays a huge part in that. And it was a driver for us. Sometimes, a a solution could be the best in class, but just because of cost factors, it's not viable as a product for us in-house and to scale the way we need to. So yeah, no, we've gone at every path, and I think for even us, it's really to the point where, build it or buy it type of mentality, right? Where do we develop in-house, which we're not a software company, we're a construction group, right? And so with that, we've always been really good at partnering with, Joseph and the Omars of the world, right? To kind of find these really creative solutions, but then, really trying to figure out, I think beyond just sweat equity and partnering with them is, how do we, what does that transition look like? Because at some point, potentially, the elephant in the room is you may potentially get bought out, right? And so what happens when that transition, right? It's, that sweat equity with the partnership, does that maintain, or, are we face that next year with seeing a, 800% markup that David and I are like, can't sell to leadership to maintain, right? And so it's all across the board, David. I think to answer your question, it's really looking for those right opportunities with the right, for me too, is the project support, right? It's also making sure we've got the right people that's going to be driving that safari potentially, because you can put a fast race car in every job. Not everyone knows how to drive it and use it effectively. So that plays into that decision process as well.
Agreed. So we hit 2:45. We got 14 minutes left here. I want to open it up to some Q&A if we have any of those available.
Yeah, it looks like, hey, David, we had a couple questions come into the Q&A. The first one was, how long does it take a GC to truly evaluate a new solution? Is a pilot enough, or does adopting and the investment and training take too long for a pilot to really give that picture?
David, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll hit it first, because like I said, I've worked for Holder for about 12 years, so I have the kind of the large scale GC mentality, and Winter is a little bit smaller, so I can kind of see it from both sides. I think it's easier with a smaller firm, honestly, to get implementation, just because you get to affect everybody all at once versus trying to affect 50 projects all at once. What I found is you want to find a pilot, successfully for me anyways, is you want to find a pilot and a team that's going to support it and really be your evangelist for it, because I can shout all day long about how great this tool is, but when a superintendent comes out and says, you need to call David because he's got this thing that made my life a lot easier, the rest of the superintendents are going to listen to that, versus me walking around the job site with my shiny tools and saying, hey, I need to help you. How can my BIM help you, right? Because they just look at me cross-eyed like I have no idea what you're talking about. But if I have another superintendent come out there touting the praises of it, that's when I found pilots are actually successful. So find a job that makes sense. Don't just try and force me onto 5 different projects. Really evaluate the right job and the right team that are actually going to make it successful. Otherwise, it's going to be failure. But once it is successful, again, they're going to sell it for you all day long. They're going to tout about how great it was and how much it helped their jobs, because we're all in construction. We're all pretty competitive, and these job sites are always wanting to show how well they did things and how well they supplied the client the product at the end of the day. And if they can say that these tools help them, they get to tout that to all their constituents.
No, and I agree with everything David said there. I think part of it too is, I think the question was, how long does it take? I think a lot of it's predicated on how mature the product is as well, right? Are we in early development curve? Are we going to get a product that's somewhat mature? And then really for Hensel Phelps, and of the 12 districts I play oversight on, how many of our jobs are using it? And a lot of times these technologies are coming to me, to David's point, via project superintendent, which is a great start, right? Because when you've got the end user already loving that product, for me, it's really to understand, okay, we've got 2 districts on board right now and 3 projects, right? And then as we start to see that critical mass, that's when it really starts to become a process where do we make it standard across the company and give it this product that opportunity to get in every one of our projects around the country, right? And so again, different factors, the maturity of it dictates the length, and then with that, the critical mass and the traction that we get from the end users, like the superintendents and the office engineers within our job sites, right? That really what grows it naturally for us. And then again, where corporate takes over is when we do get that critical mass, and then we go and we start to consider, does that make sense as an enterprise agreement?
Finding software companies that are willing to partner with you to do these tests is also really helpful and really, really important. I found that 'cause a lot of times we'll be testing things that we already have a solution for, and it's hard to justify to the teams, all right, you're going to have to pay this much more. You're going to have to do a parallel test at the same time you're already doing something else. It's really hard for them to swallow all that extra work and effort and time and money. But if you can find a partnership with a software firm that understands that if you give them the right feedback and the right data back, they're going to get something out of it. Don't just take the software and work in a silo and don't give them anything, because otherwise nobody's going to want to work with you. But if you kind of really put the product through its paces and give them the feedback that they need to help produce a better product and help evolve that product, they're going to be much more likely to help you with, some free licenses on this job, assuming you're going to pay for it in the next one, kind of thing. It's finding those partnerships with the right companies that makes a lot of sense. It's been really successful for me.
Great. Okay. One of the other questions was, what's the largest holdback from implementing they wrote existing technology? I assume we're talking about new technologies, though. Is it additional investment, or is it the lack of understanding, right? And they sort of startups need to do more educating on why their solutions are better to use.
You want to get that one, Ty?
Sure. Could you rephrase that question real quick? I thought
yeah. So I think the question what they're trying to ask is basically for you, Ty, or for you, David, right? What's the largest holdback from you guys looking or exploring new technologies? Is it the lack of understanding of how that solution can help drive growth for your business, or is it the additional investment that may be necessary for something that you guys aren't invested in today?
So we're looking all day. There's really no holdback in looking. If anything, Dave and I are probably window shopping a ton. So maybe if the question is specific to once we look, what is that commitment and what's the holdback? And is it potentially investing or acquiring or just purchasing, right? A lot of it for us, I think even today, and David probably faces the same thing where, there's more complexities in selection of tools today than there ever has been. Again, with the overlapping of multitude of solutions today that we have. And then with that, as Hensel Phelps, we do a lot of state and federal work. So the whole, we're trying to get compliance when it comes to DFAR. So again, you may have a great solution, but it may be hosted somewhere that's not allowable for some of our jobs, right? And so that could be a huge gating factor. So many variables beyond it, being a great solution, all the logistics behind it, even to where the data is being housed, is it the data, protected at resting state? All those things that I never thought I would have to consider in selecting the tool today is bubbling up as a priority, as something I have to consider before we even are thinking about bringing this tool in-house today, So those are some of the constraints that I see from my side. And really, to touching it earlier, it's just, for me, it's, do we have that right job with that right progressive owner and that right contract and the right people at the job site to support it? Again, these tools are all to a certain degree tremendous and great, but if I don't get those energies behind it, it really doesn't provide a lot of value in terms of growing that tool or making it the viable solution we think it can be. So
you hit all the same things I was going to think of there, Ty. But my two main buckets I think would be just like you said, value. I really don't care as much how much something costs as long as it provides a subsequent or more value to that job, right? If it costs $10 and I make $20 off of it, fine. If it costs $1 million and I can make $2 million off of it, even better. But it really doesn't matter how much something costs as long as it can supply the right amount of value. The other issue with us is, do we already have a tool or a solution that's in place? And do we already have something that's part of our workflow? If you're just going to swap out one tool for another and it does basically the same thing, does that really add enough value to really justify, throwing a wrench in our entire workflow? If you're going to add one extra little tool on my clash detection process that gives me some reporting, is that enough to really circle out and swap out my entire process that I've had for 15 years? Does what I have work perfectly? No, probably not. But I figured out a way to band-aid it to where it works well enough with my workflow. My team understands it and they understand the tool. You have to really justify that there's a reason for me to swap out this entire process that I've figured out and it works for us. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But like you said, Ty, we're constantly window shopping and seeing new things. Every day I've got people calling me about new softwares that come out. It's, it's a large part of our job is just kind of keep a finger on the pulse of the industry and see all those new things that are coming out and try and figure out and vet those and figure out what makes sense for us as a contractor.
Great. All right. Looks like there was just one more question, and I know we're tight on time. So, what can early technology providers do to ensure confidence for potential customers, right? So, and the examples they gave were like software escrows, et cetera, right? So, like I imagine Ty and David, as you guys are evaluating things, right? There's this, and I think you may have answered a little bit on this, Ty, in your previous responses. There's requirements that they may not know of, right? Where it's hosted, et cetera, et cetera. But are there other things that early companies can do to help instill confidence? Saying, like, so the software escrow is an example. I've done that effectively in other startups that I've run, right? Where hey, we're really early. We're willing to put our software and our code in escrow for you. So if we go belly up, unfortunately, right, you still will have access to that escrow. And to your point, I get it. You're not software developers, and that's not your core business. But can startups or early technology providers do anything to help build confidence in their brand when they may not have it yet, right? They may not have lots of customers out there and testimonials out there that can instill that for you.
Really, I think it's just like I said before. Trying to do testing on new software like that is really going to be a parallel effort for us, because we already probably have a way to do what they're trying to sell us that they can do better. And so it's going to be finding the right team to do it, but really convincing our teams that it's going to be a tool that works. We've tested a lot of stuff over the years, and it's not blown up in our face, but blown up in our face. And like the teams are really jaded sometimes about trying new things because they don't want to put all this effort into something, and all of a sudden this one button doesn't work anymore, and they've lost all their time. Right. So really instilling that confidence in our teams early on, those kickoff meetings are really, really crucial, and being honestly, with what works and what doesn't work. So we don't set the bar too high and fall on our face. Right. Because it's egg on my face if I go to my team and say, I got this new tool that's really going to work great. And all of a sudden it just doesn't. And we've tested several things in the past like that. So they lose their confidence in me as well. So really, really showing and, being very transparent with what the tool can and cannot do early on is really important for us.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the stability is huge, right? I think we're going to put our energies behind it, and having it be stable is a must-have, right? The other piece, I think, as startups are getting going and engaging with GCs, I think, in my opinion, the agility to adjust and course correct, but where it makes sense, because I think, like David's team and my team, once you get engaged, you're going to want everything, meaning that you're designing this Camry to gain, great fuel mileage, right? And then you get to the different job sites and they're wanting you to recreate it into a Ferrari that goes 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, right? So really that balance act of understanding really that really where there's some enhancements that you can quickly do to really gain that confidence and that traction. But the other piece of that too, I think with that type of development is understanding that within your roadmap, really, you don't want to buck too far and stay linear to what your goals were originally. I think it's a balance. And the last piece is, I think, with the startups that we've worked with, understanding that end user, right? I mean, meaning that functionality within your platform, it may be to you as the developer a very simple click of a button. But if you were at that job site and that individual at the job site was tasked to hitting that button 100 times a day, and it doesn't work the way they needed to, right there's a huge disconnect, right? So again, getting exposure to that end user at that job site for that task and just seeing the day in the life of that individual really opens up eyes and can help you really develop your product and enhance it. So
those are all great points.
Awesome. Great. Well, we're pressed for time. I don't have any other questions that I see in the chat or in the Q&A section. So I just want to say thank you to all the panelists. I appreciate your time for making the time today to participate at Shadow Summit. Thank you for all the attendees that did add some questions. And I just thank you very, very much for your time, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.